Okay, guys, in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you the difference between floats or doubles and ints. So if this is your RAM, an int would take up 4 bytes. So an int would take up 1, 2, 3, 4 bytes. A float will take up 4 bytes as well, but it'll be able to store a decimal point. And a double is going to take up 8 bytes. And they're signed. So the biggest and smallest values we could do with an int would be, you'd have to say 2 to the 32 divided by 2. And that'll be the biggest and smallest values because they're signed. So let's look at an example of how we could use these things. Okay. So let me make a new replit. Make sure it's C++. And we'll say using and let's do a program that will take the take the average of a few numbers. Take the average of 5 numbers. So what we'll do, it'll be similar to what we did in class. We're gonna do this. It'll first take the sum and then it'll take the average. So we're gonna say there'll be 5 integer numbers. Again, these are 4-byte signed numbers that can't store a decimal. So we'll say int num1 equals, 9. Int num2 equals 10. Int num3 equals 13. Int num4 equals, 60. And then int num5 equals 43. Okay, so we have 5 numbers, and we'll say int sum is going to equal num1 plus num2 plus num3 plus num4 plus num5. All right? So that'll be that. Now what we want to do is we want to get their average. So we're going to say, we're going to make one more if. Actually, let's do this. Double average is going to equal the sum divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Divided by 5.0. I'll explain why we have to put 5.0. So we're going to say cout, the average, we'll say the sum equals sum. That'll push us to a new line. And we'll say the average equals average and line. So let's take a look at how this works. Okay. All right. So let's make this one 61. Let's make this 11. Let's try now. All right, perfect. So now you could see that we have an average with a decimal point. Okay, now what happens if we didn't divide it by 5.0? We just divide it by 5. Let's take a look. Now you might say, well, double average, that should be 27.4, but it's not, right? When I do this, I get 27.4. So what's happening? What's happening is if I take an integer, which is sum, and I divide it by an integer, I get an integer. But if I take an integer and I divide it by a double, which is that, or a floating point number, it'll return a floating point number. That's really important. The other way I could do this is I could do this. I could say this. So now I could run it. So that'll work too. So I could cast one into a double. Right? Or I could just make one a double. It doesn't matter. So I could do something like this. If we want to get a little bit more clever, I could say int. I could call it number of values equals 5. And instead of putting 5 down here, I could put number of values. Right? And This is probably a little bit better to do it this way. And there you go. That's called a cast. Now, could I take this cast and could I put it on the denominator instead? Sure. If I'm being a completely crazy man, can I cast both? Sure, but I don't need to, right? I only need to do one. And there you go. So again, ints are 4 bytes. They store signed numbers from 2 to the 32 divided by 2, negative and positive. Doubles are 8 bytes, so they store really huge numbers that store decimal points. That's really all there is to it. So thanks for watching.